Is it possible that Prince Andrew didn't know about Epstein?
Highly unlikely. Look, you've got Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, both were convicted for sex trafficking of young girls. And then you have around Epstein a large number of people, whichever way you slice it, would have seen large numbers of young girls in Epstein's orbit. And even if they didn't make the mental connection of this is sex trafficking, anyone would have said, what's going on here? So, no, I don't think it is possible. But we'll never know because it's never going to go to court.
Do you not think?
Who knows? I mean, the wheels of justice turn slowly, don't they? But we'll see, But the reason, the moment you start talking about Prince Andrew, everyone then goes to, it's Andrew Epstein, it's the elites in all of that. We're going to talk about modern slavery, which is something that touches my life, touches your life, touches every viewer's life. And the danger of just focusing on that the whole time is everyone thinks, it's something that's over there and it doesn't personally touch me. But, I don't know how the wheels of justice work. So, we observe, we keep watching. But what's not in doubt is Jeffrey Epstein guilty of sex trafficking, Ghislaine Maxwell guilty of sex trafficking. Epstein took the coward's way out, took his life. Ghislaine Maxwell sits in a prison for her crimes.
If you believe he took his own life.
Well, there we go. Conspiracy theory or not.
I hate conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
I don't hate them. I know some have to be right. I mean, Epstein in itself was one that was right. There was conspiracies for a while or theories about Epstein for some time before it came to light. There are some that obviously Watergate was a conspiracy that was true. Rarely, but they are. And I think the cameras were off, right? I think that's just known. The cameras in his prison were off. It just seems unlikely that he could have taken his own life so quickly when they were watching him.
We'll never know. I mean, and that's the beauty of a conspiracy theory. I think he took the coward's way out. He didn't want to face reality, which is, here was a man that was buying young girls for the purpose of what? If you have sex with somebody against their will, that's called rape.
Yeah.
So he was multiple times raping young girls.
We're going to get into the dynamics of how this works on a global scale. Yep. In Epstein's case, what's the business of this? Where is there a website on the dark web? Where's he going about finding these women?
So what we learned with Ghislaine Maxwell was she in effect was the recruiter. So she was going out and recruiting. And what she was doing was looking for vulnerable girls, enticing them in, often around money. So she would, look for girls that were poor, that, didn't have, if you like, the sort of the social construct around them to keep them safe. They then were abused and they were then forced to recruit others in that whole process. That model is not just true around sexual exploitation, it's true around forced labor, domestic servitude, forced criminality, that the exploiter looks for somebody that's vulnerable and preys on that vulnerability, is really clever and smart about how they prey on that vulnerable. They create a psychological connection, keep them under psychological control, but they're doing it for the sole purposes of exploiting that individual and inevitably for the sole purposes of making money. Now, the Epstein thing is slightly different, a fabulously wealthy individual, and he was using Ghislaine Maxwell to recruit girls for his personal gratification.
So I've got an image in my head of sort of an almost Oliver Twist character of Ghislaine walking around the streets and finding people who are down on their luck and saying, hey, here's a bit of cash. Is that accurate in any way, or is it a mix of things?
It's a mix of things. So that, there were an orbit of young girls that she had access to. She would have been very adept at spotting who's the person that I can prey on. And I deliberately use that word because it is prey. In almost like a psychopathic way. They're spotting, that's the person that I can draw in, get under my control, and then I can exploit them. And then I create the environment by which they don't feel free to leave. And look at the time span as well, which is even some of the victims have taken decades to come forward. because dealing with the reality of what's happened to them and getting free from that control is huge. And the psychological trauma, that they've got to go through and work through before they can say, actually, this happened to me. And just take a step back. Imagine if that was you. And I've talked with clinical psychologists, and they say, at a minimum, between when exploitation takes place and when that individual can talk about it and not re-traumatize themselves, is at least 7 years.
Wow. You're basically taking a huge chunk of someone's life away from them when you do this.
Yeah, and look, what modern slavery, here's a definition. It's not a legal definition. It's not, something that governments are signed up to, but I think it helps people understand what it is. Modern slavery is an illicit commodity trade. The commodity is a human being. So what happens is a human being is turned into a commodity. And just think of the psychological trauma of that, realizing that you're nothing more than something that has been bought, that's been sold, and has now been exploited, and you can't see a way out. You're fearful to leave. There may be threats against you, against your family. You lose all hope. That's what it is. It's the dehumanizing of an individual into nothing more than a commodity in order to make money for your exploiters.
Do we have any indication that there are other Epsteins out there? Are you on the lookout? I know most of your work is with ordinary people doing this, but big celebrities, big money people?
I don't, but what I would say is just as with victims, the same is true with exploiters. They come from every walk of society. Every country in the world has got a problem with this. I've met victims who didn't know what a mobile phone was, and I've met victims that have got an MBA, and all points in between. If you say what's the common denominator, it's that vulnerability quotient. It's either somebody recognized them as vulnerable and preyed on them. So we have like what's called the lover boy syndrome. So this is around sexual exploitation. Girl, say in a village in Eastern Europe, guy swoops in, adores her, showers her with gifts. You're my girlfriend. All of this. This go on for a year, 2 years sometimes. Then, let's keep it to the UK. Let's go on holiday to London. Travel to London, arrive in London, come through passport control or on the Eurostar or whatever. Oh, give me your passport because I'll just keep it safe. You know what the streets of London are like. It's dangerous in that whole process. Why wouldn't you trust? The boyfriend that's been with you for 2 years, adores you and all of that. Let's go and visit this place, or we're staying at this place. Walk into the flat. And I'll make it gruesome because sometimes it is gruesome, and literally sold to the person in the flat in front of them, and then multiple rapes take place in order to, quote, break that individual, and then sold into the sex trade.
Oh my God.
That's the reality. And you say, well, why does that person take 2 years? Because the payoff, because of the money that they can get for that individual.
How much money can they get?
Well, I've seen figures like 250,000.
What you described, it's I used to do a lot of videos, particularly on cults, and the cult dynamics of love bombing somebody, cutting off the rest of their family. It sounds really, really similar. Obviously, cults are often run by people with narcissistic disorders. Do you have an idea of the profile of the kind of person who is? What do you call? What are they? Slave traders,
exploiters, traffickers, enslavers. All doing the same thing. What's the profile? You are prepared to see another human being as a commodity, i.e. not a human being. And you look at that individual and you say, okay, they can make me money. And whether it's in sexual exploitation, or it's in forced labor, or it's domestic servitude, or it's forced criminality, or all of them. I've met victims that were in forced labor situations during the day and then forced sexual exploitation during the night. Why wouldn't you? Because you want to maximize the profit and the return on your commodity and on your investment. all the way through to organ trafficking. Again, why wouldn't you? You know, if they've run out of, if you like, use, then let's go the whole hog.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about organ trafficking in a bit, because that's just so gruesome. I can't imagine that this poor person, the moment they realize that everything from the last 2 years has been a lie and they're about to go through the most brutal possible thing. Is part of your job at Unseen meeting these victims? And are they I'm imagining mostly young women, but is that how it is?
Well, no, it's about 50% women, 50% men.
Oh, wow.
What we do, so we're part of what's called the UK's national referral mechanism. So when people are identified as potential victims of trafficking, they, under what's called ECAT, the European Convention Against Trafficking, are entitled to support whilst the state makes a decision around, is that person a victim of crime?
Okay.
And so that can be accommodation, that can be help with establishing their identity, because they've lost their papers, or rather their papers have been taken off them. It's psychological support, trauma support, health support, dentist, sometimes horrific cases of people having their teeth smashed out with a hammer as a means of control. People arriving with, if you look at them, you think, oh, hang on, that arm's not quite right. They would have had broken bones, never gone to hospital, not sat properly in that whole process, all the way through to all of the psychological terrors and trauma around that. So our services are really trauma-informed, really highly skilled staff that work with them. And then also have to work with, if they're a foreign national, work with the Home Office, work with police, work with legal. For some of them, they will simultaneously have an asylum claim as well, because it's not safe for them to go back to their country. So it's like they're really complex problems to deal with. So we work with that. We then also run the UK's Modern Slavery Helpline. We just published our annual assessment the other day. A 20% increase in call volumes year on year, nearly 12,000 calls.
So sorry, something you were saying before, which I think people don't entirely realize. I mean, a third of my audience are in the States, a third are in the UK here, and a third elsewhere. How close we all are to this, not just people being sex trafficked, but just sex traffickers just around us. Is that right, that most people just watching wherever they are don't realize quite how close this is to home?
So I'll go big numbers and bring it all down to home. So the global estimate now is that there are about 50 million people in situations of slavery.